We have here today Olu Oni. Olu is the Managing Director of Acuity Derivatives. Olu, thank you very much for joining us.
You're most welcome.
Olu, how would you say that buy-side firms have coped with this vast array of operational changes that are required to cope with regulatory changes?
That's an interesting question. I would probably start off trying to bifurcate the buy-side firms. I'd say the larger asset managers probably belong to a cohort that includes the sell-side firms in terms of how they're approaching some of the regulatory challenges. Some of the small asset managers you could probably put in a second cohort. I can speak more to the first cohort, and to give context to my comments, I'd say when we say regulatory challenges, I'm really thinking about three main ones. Dodd-Frank and EMIR in Europe sort of together, which I think impose challenges on the execution, the clearing, and the reporting side of things. Yeah. I would pull Volcker metrics. So Volcker is part of Dodd-Frank, as you know, but it imposes certain challenges around tying risk and P&L together and bringing those things together in an aggregated fashion that I think a lot of firms are not used to, sort of looking at some of their metrics in that fashion. And I think I would put Basel III in a third category in terms of the capital costs that it imposes on firms, so specifically around CCR, counterparty credit. So with that context, I would say for the first cohort in terms of the large asset managers, I think there are probably three waves of challenges, and firms are at different sort of points in those waves. The first one is sort of around connectivity and I guess aggregation internally. So connectivity to CCPs, connectivity to FCMs, and just internally getting the systems geared up to be able to connect to these new venues. Alongside that is the aggregation piece. So firms breaking up silos internally to bring data together in a fashion that they can sort of report in a sensible way. That I consider first wave. A second wave I would put as context, because I think some of the work or some of the challenges that firms see in that first wave is often without context or with limited context in terms of the profitability of trades, the risk of what they're actually reporting, and whether you have similarity of risk. So sort of normalizing risk, bringing profitability context and risk context to the data that they're reporting on. The third phase, which I think is probably the most challenging, is really around intelligence. So things like optimizations and arbitrage. And I think firms are sort of at different points of those three waves, and the challenges reflect what point in those waves they are.
Olu, you've touched upon the challenges very well. Could you expand a little bit more? What are the challenges that they're facing right now?
I would say it's the second and the third waves that I alluded to earlier on. I think from a profitability perspective, there's a lot of focus on the true cost of a trade, both on the sell side and by virtue of that, spilling over to the buy side, but also for the buy side firms that are very interested in knowing exactly the costs of what they're paying for, the bid-offer spreads on the trades they do. There are a number of metrics that have emerged in the industry on the back of the crisis. So a more detailed look at counterparty credit, CVA, and its counterpoint DVA. A closer look at FVA, so your funding costs, and incorporating that into the trades that you do, right? And the capabilities for being able to either correctly price those and price them upfront, because again, I think one of the shifts is being able to make these context assessments much earlier in the cycle. So pre-trade analytics. And being able to respond to those, having workflows that allow you to do so. And likewise on the risk. I think the challenges there are probably even more nuanced in the sense that, sort of having a good understanding of the risks associated with different trades that you do, so being able to classify those risks. One of the things that I think is happening on the back of the regulatory changes with in respect to risk is you have standardization of instruments. With standardization of instruments, basis becomes a big deal because you have standard instruments that don't exactly match to the risks that buy-side firms or just takers of that risk want to hedge. So that there's more of an emphasis on the differences between what they can trade and the actual risks that they want exposure to. So basis sort of becomes a big deal. And again, not a lot of firms internally are geared to be able to look at their risk in that nuanced fashion. The third wave in terms of intelligence and sort of being able to, across these different venues that now exist, there are arbitrage opportunities that exist in terms of how one CCP thinks of the risks they take on versus another, the methodologies they use versus another. There are also lots of differences in terms of portfolios and how clients want to optimize their portfolios either for risk or for margin that they pay. So there are opportunities and challenges in terms of being able to do those what I call intelligence type maneuvers in terms of optimization or in terms of arbitrage. So those are the greatest challenges I think buy-side firms and sell-side firms too are currently trying to tackle.
Thank you, Olu. I think you've really well defined what the challenges are. But with challenge, there's opportunity. So what do you feel that the opportunities are that arise from these challenges? Oh,
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think certainly for the buy side, I think some of the, there's a bit of a blurring for some of the agency type activities between the sell side and the buy side. So in terms of client agency, in terms of even market making. And I think it creates an opportunity for some buy-side firms to step into a space that maybe traditionally was occupied by a sell-side firm. Plus, there are sell-side firms who, sort of given the new cost structure, are exiting some of those markets because they can't profitably conduct business in them. So I think it creates an opportunity, certainly for some of the larger asset managers to step into that space. I think it's also made the business a lot more technology driven, which by definition sort of opens up a lot of opportunities for firms that can embrace technology and sort of use it to seize some of the opportunities that exist. So I absolutely think there are substantial opportunities that the reshaping of the industry sort of presents.
So, Olu, at TSAM, I hear you're presenting at both the Technology and Operational Strategy Conference as well as the OTC Derivatives Conference. So, what attracted you to TSAM?
It's an interesting question. First, I think the premise of the conferences, both in terms of, looking at OTC derivatives and looking at the industry and the forces reshaping the industry, and then a focus on technology and operations, I think is absolutely the right way to think about it. It's also the way we think of a lot of these changes as a consulting firm. We think that marrying the technology expertise and some of the interesting things going on the technology side with some of the interesting things going on the organizational and the industry side is absolutely the way to look at it. They two complement each other. So from that premise, I was definitely very keen, to get engaged on, both sides of the spectrum. There are a lot of interesting things going on the operational space as well, because I think for a lot of firms, their operational infrastructure is kind of playing catch up to a lot of the developments that have been going on in the front of the shop. So again, I think marrying those things together sort of presents very interesting opportunities to discuss and learn. So.
Excellent, very, very good. And do you have any final or closing thoughts, something that you think it's important that we know?
I am looking forward to the conference and looking forward to meeting other people who share the same interest I have in terms of this. So,
thank you very much for coming by. Thank you.